To the beautiful couple. The crystal champagne flute in my hand caught the light as I raised it in a toast to my grandson, Ethan, and his radiant bride, Rachel. The reception hall of the Four Seasons Palm Beach glowed with candlelight, floral arrangements of white roses and hydrangeas gracing each table. 233 guests, I'd checked the final count myself that morning, smiled back at me. A sea of well-wishers gathered to celebrate this union. At 72, I'd witnessed many family milestones, but none filled me with such uncomplicated joy as seeing Ethan, who had overcome so much in his young life, find happiness with someone who clearly adored him. Their love story had unfolded during his medical residency. Rachel, a dedicated pediatric nurse who shared his passion for healing children, had captured his heart with her compassion and quiet strength. May your life together be blessed with the same love and purpose that has marked your journey thus far, I continued, my voice steady despite the emotion tightening my throat. Your grandfather would have been so proud of the man you've become, Ethan. Ethan's eyes glistened as he nodded in acknowledgement, his arm tightening around Rachel's waist. My late husband, Walter, had been gone for 5 years now, but his presence felt especially close today. In Ethan's tall frame, in the family heirloom cufflinks gleaming at his wrists, in the values so evident in the life he'd built. I was about to conclude my toast when a familiar voice cut through the moment. While we're giving advice to the newlyweds, my daughter Caroline announced, rising from her seat at the family table, champagne glass held aloft. I think we should discuss proper wedding gifts. Shouldn't we, Mother? A ripple of uncertain laughter moved through the crowd. Caroline, at 51, was striking in a designer gown that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payments. She'd always been beautiful, and always aware of it. 4 flutes of champagne had heightened the color in her cheeks and loosened whatever filter normally restrained her more acquisitive impulses. Caroline, I said quietly, perhaps we could discuss this later. She ignored me completely, her smile dazzling as she addressed the room. My son and his lovely bride are starting their life together, and they'll need a proper home, not some starter apartment in the city. My stomach tightened. I knew exactly where this was heading. Mother, Caroline continued, turning toward me with an expression of faux graciousness that did nothing to mask the demand in her eyes. Isn't it time you gave the Palm Beach house to Ethan and Rachel? What does a widow need with a 7-bedroom beachfront estate after all? The room fell silent. Even the waitstaff froze in their movements. At the head table, Ethan's face had drained of color, while Rachel stared down at her plate, mortified. The Palm Beach house had been in our family for 3 generations. Walter and I had purchased it from his parents, renovated it lovingly, and filled it with 45 years of memories. It was where we'd hosted our children's graduation celebrations, our grandchildren's birthday parties, where Walter had spent his final months gazing at the ocean he'd loved since childhood. It was also, I knew, the object of Caroline's obsession for decades. She'd grown up there, but had never been able to afford such a property on her own, despite her husband Richard's success as an investment banker. The house represented everything she felt entitled to as a Hawthorne. Caroline, I said, keeping my voice gentle but firm, the Palm Beach house is not a wedding gift. As you know, I have plans for that property that will benefit all 3 of my grandchildren equally. Her laugh was sharp, cutting. Oh yes, Mother's mysterious plans. Always planning, always controlling, always making us wait for what should rightfully be ours now. Richard tugged at her arm, murmuring something that was clearly a request to sit down. She shook him off. Do you know, Caroline addressed the increasingly uncomfortable guests, that my mother is worth over $30 million? That she lives in that magnificent beachfront mansion all alone, while young couples like Ethan and Rachel struggle to find affordable housing in this market? We're not struggling, Mom, Ethan interjected, his voice tight with embarrassment. Please sit down. Don't interrupt, darling. I'm doing this for you. Caroline's smile had taken on a brittle quality. Mother has always been like this, hoarding the family wealth, doling out small allowances like we're children, making us feel grateful for crumbs from her table. The accusation stung with particular sharpness because it was so fundamentally untrue. Walter and I had paid for our children's education in full, helped with down payments on their first homes, established trusts for our grandchildren's futures. What we hadn't done was bankroll the extravagant lifestyle Caroline felt was her birthright. Caroline, "This is neither the time nor the place," I began. "It's exactly the time." Her voice rose, the filter of social propriety now completely dissolved by champagne and long, simmering resentment. "You're just a selfish old woman who can't bear to part with anything. You'd rather sit alone in that massive house than give your grandson the wedding gift he deserves." Gasps rippled through the reception hall. My son David half rose from his seat across the room, his expression thunderous, but his wife placed a restraining hand on his arm. Even the string quartet had stopped playing, the silence amplifying Caroline's words as they hung in the air. I felt 233 pairs of eyes fixed on me, waiting for my response to this public humiliation. My hands trembled slightly, but I clasped them together in my lap, a lifetime of composure under pressure serving me now. "Your attention, please," the wedding planner called desperately, trying to salvage the situation. "I believe the cake cutting is scheduled next." "Oh, let's not change the subject," Caroline overrode her. "Let's talk about how my mother uses her money to control all of us, how she dangles inheritances to make us dance to her tune, how she—" "That's enough." Ethan's voice, usually so gentle, cut through his mother's tirade with unexpected authority. He stood, his face flushed with a mixture of anger and mortification. "Mom, you're embarrassing yourself, and you're ruining our wedding reception." Caroline blinked, momentarily shocked by her son's rebuke. The momentary silence gave me the opening I needed. With deliberate calm, I opened the small beaded evening bag resting on my lap. Inside was an envelope I'd planned to present privately to Ethan and Rachel later that evening after the festivities concluded. But Caroline's outburst had forced my hand. "Perhaps," I said, my voice clear and steady despite the tension constricting my chest. "It's time I shared what's actually in my plans for the Palm Beach house." As I withdrew the cream-colored envelope embossed with the family attorney's return address, the entire reception hall seemed to collectively hold its breath. The envelope felt heavier than its physical weight as I held it before me, the attention of 233 guests pressing like a tangible force. Caroline's expression had shifted from righteous indignation to wary curiosity, her champagne flute now forgotten in her hand. "Mother," she said, attempting to reclaim control of the narrative, "this isn't necessary. We can discuss family matters privately." "You chose to make this public, Caroline," I replied quietly. "Now we'll finish it publicly." Ethan and Rachel exchanged a glance I couldn't quite interpret. Concern, perhaps, or resignation. My grandson had always been perceptive. He likely sensed the seismic shift about to occur in our family dynamic. I rose from my seat, smoothing the silk of my silver blue dress, a gesture that gave me a moment to gather my thoughts. At 72, I'd learned that true power often resided in calm deliberation rather than reactive emotion. "For those who don't know me well," I began, addressing the room full of guests. "I'm Margaret Hawthorne, Ethan's grandmother. My late husband Walter and I were blessed with financial success beyond anything we could have imagined when we started our technology company in the 1970s. The tension in the room remained palpable, but a different quality had entered it now, curiosity replacing the earlier discomfort. The Palm Beach house that my daughter mentioned has been in our family for 3 generations. It's where Walter spent his final days, where Ethan recuperated during his illness as a child, where our family has gathered for every important celebration for decades. I opened the envelope with steady fingers, removing several sheets of legal documentation. 6 months ago, I finalized arrangements to establish the Walter Hawthorne Foundation, dedicated to providing restorative retreats for children recovering from cancer treatment and their families. A murmur rippled through the crowd. From the corner of my eye, I saw Caroline's posture stiffen. "The Palm Beach House," I continued, "will serve as the Foundation's primary retreat facility, offering families the same healing environment that benefited our own family during Ethan's battle with leukemia at age 12. I turned directly to Ethan and Rachel, whose expressions had transformed from embarrassment to something deeper. "Ethan, you and Rachel were the first to know about this plan, which is why your request for donations to childhood cancer research in lieu of wedding gifts was so perfectly aligned with what your grandfather would have wanted." Caroline's face had drained of color as the implications of my words sank in. Not only was I not giving the Palm Beach house to Ethan as she'd demanded, but Ethan had already known about and apparently approved my plans for the property. "You knew?" she asked him, her voice barely audible over the hushed murmurs of the guests. You knew she was giving away our family home? Ethan straightened in his chair, his arm still around Rachel's shoulders. It's not being given away, Mom. It's being given purpose. Rachel and I will be serving on the foundation's board. We've already been working with Grandma's team on the renovation plans. The betrayal Caroline clearly felt was written across her features, her carefully maintained composure crumbling. But it's our family legacy, your inheritance. The house was never meant to be anyone's personal inheritance, I interjected gently. Walter and I always intended it to serve a greater purpose eventually. The foundation was his idea originally, something we discussed during his final months. I returned my attention to the wider audience, many of whom were watching with expressions ranging from fascination to discomfort at being unwilling witnesses to our family drama. For those concerned about Ethan and Rachel's future, I continued, please know that Walter and I established trust funds for each of our grandchildren years ago. Ethan and Rachel will receive their portion as planned, which should provide a comfortable start to their married life. Caroline made a small, dismissive sound. Trust funds that they can't access until they're 35. More control, more strings attached. Actually, Rachel spoke for the first time, her normally soft voice carrying surprising authority. We've already received an advance from our trust, specifically for a down payment on a home. Ethan and I found a lovely place near the hospital where we both work. We close on it next month. This revelation seemed to stagger Caroline more than anything preceding it. She sank back into her chair, the fight visibly draining from her posture. David, my son and Caroline's younger brother, chose that moment to rise from his table across the room. At 48, he had Walter's steady presence and pragmatic nature. I think, he said, his voice pitched to Carrie without seeming confrontational, that it's time we returned our focus to celebrating Ethan and Rachel's marriage. The string quartet has that piece you requested ready, Ethan. The wedding planner seized this opportunity, gesturing frantically to the musicians who immediately began playing the gentle melody Ethan had selected for the cake cutting. The familiar ritual provided a welcome structure for guests to redirect their attention, though I noticed many conversations had dropped to whispers, undoubtedly dissecting the family drama they'd just witnessed. As I returned to my seat, I caught Ethan's eye across the room. He gave me a small nod, part gratitude, part apology for his mother's behavior. Rachel leaned close to whisper something in his ear, and his expression softened into a smile. Caroline remained seated, her posture rigid, eyes fixed on some middle distance as Richard attempted to engage her in quiet conversation. The flush of champagne and anger had been replaced by a bloodless pallor that concerned me despite everything that had transpired. She was still my daughter. Her materialistic values and occasional cruelty didn't negate the little girl I'd once rocked to sleep, the teenager whose dance recitals I'd never missed, the young woman I'd helped dress on her own wedding day. The public humiliation she'd just experienced, largely self-inflicted though it was, would leave scars that might never fully heal. As the reception gradually regained its celebratory rhythm, I felt a profound weariness settle over me. The envelope I'd produced had indeed silenced the room, but at what cost to our already fragile family bonds? Only time would tell if this fracture could be mended, or if Caroline's resentment and my response had permanently altered the landscape of our relationship. For now, I pushed these concerns aside. Today belonged to Ethan and Rachel. Tomorrow would be soon enough to face the aftermath of what had transpired. The remainder of the reception unfolded with a forced gaiety that couldn't quite disguise the undercurrent of tension. Guests laughed a bit too loudly, danced with exaggerated enthusiasm, and studiously avoided glancing toward the family table where Caroline sat in stony silence. By the time Ethan and Rachel departed in a shower of rose petals and well wishes, Caroline and Richard had already slipped away. Their absence from the final receiving line conspicuous but perhaps merciful, given the circumstances. Well, that was quite the wedding, David remarked dryly as he helped me into the waiting car that would return me to my hotel suite. His wife, Jennifer, had gone ahead with their teenage daughter, leaving us a rare moment alone. Not exactly how I envisioned the evening unfolding, I admitted, settling against the leather seat with a sigh of exhaustion. I never intended to announce the foundation so publicly. Caroline didn't leave you much choice. David's tone held no judgment, just weary acceptance of his sister's behavior, though I imagine this will be the main topic of conversation at the country club for months. The observation wasn't meant to wound, but I felt a pang nonetheless. Public spectacle had never been the Hawthorne way. Walter and I had built our fortune quietly, conducted our philanthropy discreetly, and taught our children to value substance over show. That one of those children had chosen to air family grievances before hundreds of witnesses felt like a personal failure on my part. "Do you think I handled it correctly?" I asked, suddenly needing my son's perspective. Was there a better way to respond? David considered the question with characteristic thoroughness. "Caroline put you in an impossible position. Giving in to her demand would have rewarded appalling behavior. Refusing without explanation would have cast you as the villain in her narrative. You chose transparency, which was probably the only viable option." His assessment was logical, but did little to ease the heaviness in my heart. "I should check on her tomorrow. Whatever her flaws, she's still my daughter. Give her a day or two," David advised, his expression softening. "You know how Caroline retreats when she's embarrassed. She'll need time to process what happened." I knew he was right. Caroline's pattern since childhood had been to lash out when hurt, then withdraw to nurse her wounds in private. Approaching her too soon would only deepen her humiliation and resentment. "What about Ethan and Rachel?" I asked. "Their wedding reception turned into a family soap opera. They must be devastated." "Actually," David's mouth quirked into a small smile, "Rachel told Jennifer they're considering it memorable rather than ruined. Apparently Ethan said every wedding needs one dramatic story for the grandchildren, and Caroline certainly provided theirs." The thought of Ethan finding humor in the situation lifted my spirits slightly. His resilience had always amazed me, perhaps a quality forged during his battle with leukemia as a child, when he'd faced each painful treatment with a courage that humbled the adults around him. "They're leaving for their honeymoon tomorrow?" I confirmed, mentally reviewing the schedule that had once been so clear in my mind before the evening's drama had scattered my thoughts. 2 weeks in Italy. Rachel's never been to Europe. David checked his watch. "They should be at the airport hotel by now, with an early flight tomorrow." When we reached my hotel, David insisted on escorting me to my suite, despite my protests that I was perfectly capable of finding my way. His protective instinct, so like his father's, warmed me even as I maintained I didn't need the assistance. "I'm 72, not 92, I reminded him as we rode the elevator. "Fully ambulatory and of sound mind, despite what your sister might imply." "Humor me," he replied with the same gentle stubbornness that had characterized Walter. "It's been a long evening for everyone, especially you." In my suite, I found a text message from Ethan. "Safe at airport hotel. Don't worry about tonight. We love you. Thank you for everything." The simple message brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I typed back quickly, "Love you both. Safe travels. We'll talk when you return." After David departed with a reassuring hug and promised to call tomorrow, I found myself alone with the lingering emotions of the evening. I moved to the window, gazing out at the Palm Beach coastline gleaming under moonlight. Somewhere in that silvery landscape sat the house that had become such a focal point of tonight's conflict. The Walter Hawthorne Foundation had been in development for over a year, with Ethan and Rachel intimately involved in the planning process from the beginning. Caroline's accusation that I was giving away the family legacy revealed how fundamentally she misunderstood my intentions and her son's values. The Palm Beach house wasn't being lost to the family. It was being transformed into the fulfillment of Walter's final wish. During those last months as cancer gradually claimed him, we'd spent hours on the oceanfront terrace discussing how our blessings might become blessings for others. "Remember when Ethan was sick?" he'd said one evening as the sun sank toward the horizon. "How this place became his sanctuary between treatments. How the sound of the waves seemed to ease his pain when nothing else could." I did remember. Those terrible months when our 12-year-old grandson fought for his life, his small body ravaged by chemotherapy, his spirit somehow remaining unbroken. We'd converted the ground floor guest suite into a comfortable room for him, positioned his bed to face the ocean, and watched as the natural beauty outside his window seemed to nourish something essential within him. "Other children should have this," Walter had continued, his once powerful voice by then reduced to a whisper. "Other families need a place to heal together, away from hospital lights and disinfectant smells." The idea had taken root, growing stronger even as Walter weakened. By the time he died, the foundation existed as a concept, a promise I'd made to him that I fully intended to fulfill. Caroline had never known about these conversations. She'd visited dutifully during Walter's illness, but always briefly, always visibly uncomfortable with the physical realities of his decline. She hadn't been present for those sunset talks, those whispered dreams of a legacy beyond material wealth. Perhaps that explained, at least partially, her inability to understand why the house wouldn't simply be passed down as a private residence. She'd missed the context, the emotional genesis of the foundation concept. As I prepared for bed, my phone chimed with another message, this one from David. Just checked on Caroline. She's home safely, angry and embarrassed, but physically fine. Get some rest, Mom. Tomorrow is another day. His reassurance eased one immediate concern, though the larger fracture in our family remained. Caroline's public outburst had exposed tensions that had simmered beneath the surface for years. Her materialism versus our more restrained approach to wealth, her sense of entitlement versus our emphasis on stewardship. Tonight had brought these differences into sharp, painful focus. What remained to be seen was whether understanding and reconciliation could emerge from the wreckage of Caroline's expectations. As I drifted towards sleep, Walter's voice seemed to whisper from memory, "Family is complicated, Maggie. Love them anyway." I would try, I promised him silently. I would try. Morning arrived with the particular clarity that follows emotional storms, a heightened awareness of ordinary details that had previously gone unnoticed. The precise pattern of sunlight filtering through curtains, the subtle scent of fresh coffee delivered by room service, the distant sound of waves breaking against the shore. I sat on the balcony of my hotel suite, watching Palm Beach awaken below. Sunday brunch crowds were beginning to form outside popular restaurants. Joggers traced paths along the shoreline, a world continuing its normal rhythms, utterly unaffected by the Hawthorne family drama that had unfolded the previous evening. My phone had remained silent since David's text the night before. No message from Caroline, which was expected but painful nonetheless. No updates from Richard, who had always served as family diplomat during previous conflicts. The absence of communication spoke volumes about the severity of the rupture. A knock at my door announced Jennifer, David's wife, arriving as planned to accompany me to the post-wedding brunch being hosted by Rachel's parents. Originally, Caroline and Richard had been slated to attend as well, but their appearance now seemed unlikely. "Good morning, Margaret," Jennifer greeted me with a warm hug. At 52, she carried herself with the natural grace that came from her years as a professional dancer before transitioning to teaching. "How are you holding up?" "Managing," I replied honestly, though dreading facing everyone after last night's spectacle. Jennifer's expression was sympathetic, but firm. "You have nothing to be embarrassed about. Caroline created the situation, not you." "Perhaps," I acknowledged, gathering my handbag. "But I'm still the mother who failed to instill better values in her daughter." "That's not fair to yourself," Jennifer countered as we headed toward the elevator. "Caroline has made her own choices as an adult. David turned out wonderfully with the same upbringing." The observation was meant to comfort, but it only underscored the question that had haunted me for decades. Where had I gone wrong with Caroline? How had the same parental guidance that produced David's grounded perspective resulted in his sister's materialistic entitlement? The brunch venue, an elegant restaurant overlooking the intracoastal waterway, had been decorated with the same white and blue hydrangeas from the wedding. Rachel's parents, Robert and Susan Mitchell, greeted guests with the relaxed warmth of people relieved that their hosting duties were nearly complete. Margaret, Susan embraced me with genuine affection. We'd developed a comfortable relationship during the wedding planning process, bonding over shared values and mutual adoration of Ethan and Rachel. "We missed you at the rehearsal dinner. How are you feeling?" The question was loaded with subtext. Susan had witnessed Caroline's behavior at the reception, along with everyone else. Her inquiry encompassed both genuine concern and diplomatic acknowledgement of the situation. "Much better, thank you," I replied, matching her tactful approach. A minor migraine had kept me from the rehearsal dinner, a blessing in disguise given what had transpired at the reception. "The wedding was beautiful. You and Robert did a marvelous job with everything." Susan squeezed my hand. "We're so happy to have Ethan joining our family. He's an exceptional young man. You and Walter raised a wonderful grandson." The simple validation brought unexpected emotion to my throat. "Thank you. Rachel is equally special. They complement each other beautifully." As Jennifer and I found our assigned table, I was grateful to discover David already seated, along with the parents of Rachel's college roommate. The arrangement provided a buffer of unfamiliar faces, people who might have witnessed last night's drama but had no personal investment in the Hawthorne family dynamics. David leaned close as I settled beside him. Caroline and Richard send their regrets. Apparently, they had a previously scheduled commitment they couldn't break. The transparent excuse was almost certainly fabricated, but I nodded as if accepting its legitimacy. Understandable. Have you heard from Ethan and Rachel? Their flight departed on schedule. They'll text when they land in Rome. He hesitated before adding, Ethan called this morning before heading to the airport. He wanted to make sure you were okay. The thought of my grandson worrying about me on what should have been the carefree beginning of his honeymoon created a fresh pang of regret. What did you tell him? That you're made of stronger stuff than Caroline gives you credit for, David replied with a small smile, and that he should focus on enjoying Italy with his new wife. The brunch progressed pleasantly, with toasts considerably more subdued than those at the reception. Rachel's father spoke briefly about the joy of gaining Ethan as a son-in-law. Her younger sister shared sweet anecdotes from their childhood. The event maintained the warm, intimate atmosphere that wedding farewells traditionally hold. Only Caroline and Richard's conspicuously empty seats served as reminders of the previous evening's disruption. Several guests glanced discreetly in my direction, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and sympathy that I pretended not to notice. They'll find something new to gossip about soon enough, Jennifer murmured, as we enjoyed slices of the remaining wedding cake, repurposed as brunch dessert. Palm Beach social circles have the attention span of goldfish when it comes to scandals. Her attempt at reassurance missed the mark slightly. My concern wasn't about social standing or public perception. Those had never been priorities for Walter and me. What weighed on me was the damage to our family itself, the wedge that had been driven deeper between Caroline and the rest of us. After brunch concluded, David insisted on driving me to the Palm Beach house rather than returning to the hotel. You should spend your last day here surrounded by good memories, not hotel furnishings, he argued. I didn't have the energy to refuse. The house, the very property at the center of last night's conflict, offered familiar comfort that suddenly seemed essential. As David's car wound along the oceanfront road, I gazed at the passing mansions with their manicured lawns and security gates. Palm Beach had changed dramatically since Walter and I had purchased our home here 40 years ago. What had once been merely affluent had transformed into an enclave of almost unimaginable wealth. Hedge fund managers and tech billionaires replacing the old money families who had previously dominated the island. Our house, while certainly luxurious by normal standards, was actually modest compared to many of its newer neighbors. Its value lay in its prime beachfront location and the 3 acres of land it occupied, an increasingly rare commodity as larger properties were subdivided for development. Caroline had always focused on the home's monetary value rather than its emotional significance. In her view, the fact that it could sell for upwards of $20 million outweighed any sentimental attachments or philanthropic potential. Are you sure you'll be comfortable here alone? David asked as we turned into the private drive. Jennifer and I could stay over if you'd prefer company. I'll be fine, I assured him. The foundation team is coming tomorrow to continue measuring for the renovations. I have plenty to keep me occupied until my flight home on Tuesday. The house welcomed me with the particular embrace that only long-time homes can offer. The familiar creak of the front door, the quality of light in the entryway, the subtle scent of the lemon oil used on the wooden banisters for decades. After David departed with a promise to call that evening, I moved through the rooms slowly, touching furniture and photographs, reacquainting myself with the space that would soon undergo its transformation from private residence to healing retreat. In Ethan's former sick room, now a cheerful guest suite with no visible traces of those difficult months, I paused at the window overlooking the Atlantic. The same view that had comforted my grandson during his darkest days would soon provide solace to other children fighting their own battles against cancer. The rightness of this evolution settled over me like a comfortable shawl. This was what the house had been building toward all along, its ultimate purpose now revealing itself at exactly the right moment. Caroline couldn't see it yet. Perhaps she never would. But Ethan understood, and that knowledge brought its own measure of peace. Tomorrow would bring foundation representatives, architectural discussions, and practical matters. Tonight, I would simply be present with memories, both painful and precious, that these walls contained. "We're doing the right thing, Walter," I whispered to the empty room. "Aren't we?" Only the rhythmic sound of waves answered, but somehow it was enough. 3 days later, I was back in my primary residence in Boston, a comfortable but unpretentious townhouse in Beacon Hill that had been home since Walter and I downsized 12 years earlier. The emotional whiplash of the wedding weekend had left me craving the familiar routines that anchored my daily life. Morning coffee in the small garden courtyard, correspondence handled at my antique writing desk, afternoon walks through the public garden. "Mrs. Hawthorne, there's a delivery for you," announced Mrs. Sullivan, the housekeeper who had been with me since Walter's illness. She appeared in the doorway of my study, where I'd been reviewing foundation documents. The arrangement that arrived was unmistakably from Caroline. Enormous white hydrangeas identical to those from the wedding, artfully combined with blue delphiniums in a crystal vase I recognized from her dining room. The card attached bore her distinctive handwriting, the pressure of her pen leaving slight indentations in the thick paper. "Mother, I behaved abominably at Ethan's wedding. There is no excuse for my actions, though champagne and misunderstanding contributed to my poor judgment. May we speak when you feel ready? Caroline." No explicit apology, I noted, just an acknowledgement of behavior and a tentative request for conversation. From Caroline, this represented significant humility. Her usual approach to conflict involved either righteous defensiveness or icy withdrawal until the other party made amends. I studied the arrangement thoughtfully. The flowers were beautiful but impersonal, the kind she might send to a business associate after a minor faux pas, not a daughter's peace offering after publicly humiliating her mother. Still, they represented a first step, however tentative. "Would you like me to find a place for these, Mrs. Hawthorne?" Mrs. Sullivan asked, her carefully neutral tone suggesting she had her own opinions about Caroline's behavior, but was too professional to express them. "The dining room table, please," I decided. "They'll brighten the space nicely." After she departed with the arrangement, I considered my response. Should I call Caroline immediately? Wait a day to indicate I wasn't overly eager? The calculations felt exhausting and slightly ridiculous at my age. 72 years on this earth should have elevated me beyond such adolescent chess moves. I reached for my phone and dialed Caroline's number directly. "Mother." Her voice held surprise and a hint of wariness. "I didn't expect to hear from you so soon. The flowers are lovely," I said simply. "Thank you." An awkward silence followed, stretching just long enough to become uncomfortable before Caroline spoke again. "I thought perhaps we could have lunch, or tea if you prefer, to discuss things." "Lunch would be nice," I agreed. "Are you free tomorrow?" We arranged to meet at a small French bistro equidistant from our homes, neutral territory that wouldn't give either of us the psychological advantage of home turf. After ending the call, I sat quietly for several minutes, contemplating what might actually be accomplished through this meeting. Caroline's behavior at the wedding hadn't emerged from nowhere. It represented decades of simmering resentment regarding money, perceived favoritism, and divergent values. One lunch wouldn't resolve such deeply rooted issues, but perhaps it could begin a more honest dialogue than we'd managed in years. That evening, a text arrived from Ethan, a photo of him and Rachel in front of the Trevi fountain, their faces glowing with happiness. "Greetings from Rome." The hotel concierge somehow found us a table at that impossible-to-book restaurant Rachel's been dreaming about, having the time of our lives. I smiled at their evident joy, relieved that the wedding drama seemed far from their thoughts. In response, I sent only, "You both look radiantly happy. Enjoy every moment. No mention of Caroline, no updates about family tension." Their honeymoon deserved to remain unshadowed by concerns they could do nothing about from thousands of miles away. The following day, I arrived at the bistro 10 minutes early, a habit Walter had instilled through 47 years of marriage. "Punctuality is respect made visible," he'd often said, particularly when the children complained about his insistence on leaving for events with time to spare. Caroline, predictably, arrived 5 minutes late. Not enough to be considered rude, but sufficient to establish she had a busy, important life with competing demands on her time. She looked polished, as always, in a designer suit that likely cost more than most people's monthly salary, her blonde hair expertly styled to disguise the gray she refused to acknowledge. "Mother," she greeted me with air kisses near each cheek, the social performance she'd adopted in her 20s and never abandoned, even with family. "You look well. Boston agrees with you." "Thank you," I replied, accepting the compliment at face value rather than searching for hidden barbs. "You're looking well yourself." A waiter appeared to take our drink orders. Sparkling water for me, white wine for Caroline. The ritual of studying menus and placing orders provided a convenient distraction from the conversation we were both ostensibly here to have. Only after our appetizers arrived did Caroline finally address the elephant in the room. "I want to apologize for my behavior at the wedding," she said, her voice carefully modulated. "It was inappropriate and embarrassing for everyone, especially Ethan and Rachel." The words sounded rehearsed, but not insincere, perhaps practiced in front of a mirror to ensure the right balance of contrition without excessive vulnerability. "Apology accepted," I said simply. "Though I think Ethan and Rachel might appreciate hearing it directly as well." Caroline nodded stiffly. "I've sent them a message, and a rather extravagant addition to their honeymoon, a private yacht excursion along the Amalfi Coast when they reach that portion of their trip. Typical Caroline, attempting to purchase forgiveness rather than having a difficult conversation. Still, it represented effort, which was more than I had honestly expected. "That's generous," I acknowledged. "I'm sure they'll enjoy the experience." Another silence descended as we attended to our food. I waited, giving Caroline space to direct the conversation toward whatever she truly wanted to discuss. Eventually, she set down her fork and met my gaze directly. "Why didn't you tell me about the foundation plans?" she asked, her tone more genuinely curious than accusatory. Finding out that way, in front of everyone, with Ethan already knowing, it felt like a deliberate exclusion. The question deserved an honest answer. Initially because the foundation was still taking shape legally and logistically. Later because I anticipated exactly the reaction you had. Disappointment and anger that the house wouldn't become private family property. "You could have prepared me," she countered, "given me time to adjust to the idea before the public announcement." "Perhaps," I conceded, "though I hadn't planned to announce it at the wedding at all. That was a response to your public demand." Caroline had the grace to look momentarily abashed. The champagne was a factor, and I genuinely believed you were being unnecessarily withholding about the house, that you were using it as a control mechanism. The accusation, even stated more calmly now, still stung. "Caroline, when have I ever used money or property to control you or your brother? We paid for your education, helped with your first home purchase, established trusts for your children. Walter and I were generous while still encouraging self-sufficiency." "It felt controlling," she insisted. "The way you and Dad were always so private about finances, so insistent on modest lifestyles despite your wealth, like you didn't trust us to handle the truth about the family resources." This perspective genuinely surprised me. What Walter and I had viewed as teaching sensible values around money, Caroline had experienced as secretive control. The gap in perception was illuminating, if troubling. "That was never our intention," I said carefully. "We wanted you and David to develop your own work ethic, your own relationship with money that wasn't defined by family wealth." Caroline's laugh held little humor. "Well, it backfired spectacularly with me, didn't it? I've spent my entire adult life trying to project the wealth you and Dad seemed embarrassed by." The observation contained more self-awareness than I would have credited her with. Perhaps there was hope for a more meaningful reconciliation than I'd dared expect. "We weren't embarrassed by our success," I clarified. "We were cautious about its potential impact on our children. Perhaps too cautious, in retrospect." Our main courses arrived, providing another natural pause in the conversation. As we ate, I considered how to bridge the chasm of understanding that had clearly existed for decades without either of us fully recognizing its dimensions. "The foundation," I said finally, "was Walter's vision for his legacy. Not a rejection of family inheritance, but a different kind of gift, one that honors what Ethan went through and creates meaning from that difficult experience." Caroline pushed her salmon around on her plate. "I understand the concept intellectually, but emotionally, it feels like choosing strangers over family." "Not strangers," I corrected gently. "Children facing the same battle Ethan faced, families navigating the same terrifying journey our family experienced, and not choosing them over family, including family in a different kind of legacy. For the first time, I saw a glimmer of genuine consideration in Caroline's expression. Not immediate agreement, but at least willingness to contemplate a perspective beyond her own. It wasn't resolution, but it was a beginning. An olive branch cautiously extended and perhaps cautiously accepted. 1 month after the wedding, I stood in the Palm Beach house's oceanfront living room, now emptied of the personal furnishings that had filled it for decades. Tape marks on the floors indicated where hospital-grade beds would soon be positioned to maximize the view. The room's dimensions had been carefully measured to ensure accessibility for wheelchairs and medical equipment, without sacrificing the aesthetic warmth that made the space healing rather than institutional. The contractor confirms we're still on schedule for the September opening, reported Lisa Townsend, the foundation's newly hired executive director. A former hospital administrator with expertise in pediatric oncology care, she brought both professional knowledge and personal passion to the project. Her own daughter was a childhood cancer survivor. Excellent, I replied, studying the architectural renderings spread across the temporary folding table that now served as our workspace. And the staff housing renovations on the north wing? Slightly ahead of schedule, Lisa confirmed. The conversion from guest suites to staff apartments was simpler than initially estimated. We should be able to accommodate 6 full-time care coordinators and a rotating medical team. The transformation of the house was progressing with remarkable efficiency. What had once been a private family sanctuary was steadily evolving into a carefully designed healing retreat that would serve hundreds of families in the coming years. The foundation's board, comprising medical professionals, childhood cancer survivors, and family members, including Ethan, Rachel, and David, had approved the final plans 2 weeks earlier. The projected annual operating budget would be covered by the endowment Walter and I had established, ensuring the retreat could operate indefinitely without financial concerns. Mrs. Hawthorne, Lisa's voice broke into my thoughts. There's someone here to see you. She's waiting on the terrace. Something in her tone suggested this wasn't a routine visitor. Did they give a name? Your daughter, Caroline. She said you were expecting her. I wasn't, in fact, expecting Caroline. We'd had several cautious phone conversations since our lunch meeting, but she'd shown no interest in visiting the house during the renovation process. Her appearance now was surprising, particularly without advance notice. Thank you, Lisa. I'll go speak with her. The terrace, Walter's favorite space in the entire house, stretched across the ocean side of the property, its travertine surface weathered by decades of salt air and Florida sunshine. Caroline stood at the far end, gazing out at the Atlantic, her posture rigid despite the casual linen dress she wore. This is an unexpected pleasure, I said as I approached, keeping my tone neutral but welcoming. Caroline turned, her expression difficult to read behind oversized sunglasses. I was in Palm Beach for a charity committee meeting. Thought I should see what's happening here firsthand. Progress, I noted silently. A month ago, she would have described the foundation work as what you're doing to our family home, rather than the more neutral, what's happening here. I'm happy to show you around, I offered, though it's very much a construction zone at the moment. She removed her sunglasses, revealing eyes that held wariness, but not the open hostility I might have expected earlier. I'd like that, actually, to understand the plans better. For the next 45 minutes, I guided Caroline through the partially renovated spaces, explaining each area's intended purpose in the foundation's mission. The former family bedrooms being converted to patient suites with medical accommodations discreetly integrated into the design. The kitchen being expanded to serve both nutritional and teaching functions. The library transformed into a resource center for families navigating cancer treatment options. Caroline remained largely silent, absorbing the information without commentary. Only when we reached Ethan's former sick room did she finally speak unprompted. I remember how he looked in that bed, she said quietly, staring at the space where her son had spent so many painful days, so small against the pillows, tubes everywhere. I was terrified every time I visited. The admission surprised me. Caroline had always seemed detached during Ethan's illness, making brief, perfunctory visits and finding reasons to leave quickly. I'd attributed her behavior to selfishness rather than fear. We were all terrified, I acknowledged. It's why this foundation matters so much to Ethan. He remembers how this place gave him something the hospital couldn't, a sense of normalcy, of life continuing beyond treatment rooms and medical procedures. Caroline moved to the window, touching the frame lightly. He used to count dolphins from this spot, said it gave him something to look forward to each morning. I didn't know that, I admitted, moved by this glimpse into private moments between mother and son that I hadn't been privy to. There's a lot we don't know about each other's experiences, isn't there? Caroline's questions seemed genuine rather than accusatory. Even within the same family, we each lived through Ethan's illness differently. The observation contained more insight than I would have expected from my typically self-focused daughter. That's true of most significant family events, I think. We all experience them through our own particular lens. Caroline nodded, still gazing out at the ocean. I've been thinking about that since our lunch, how differently we viewed the same family history, the same decisions about money and property. And what conclusions have you reached? I asked carefully. That I've been angry about things that weren't actually happening, she said after a long pause. I've been fighting against financial control that wasn't really being exerted, resenting decisions that weren't actually about me at all. The admission, so counter to Caroline's usual defense mechanisms, momentarily left me speechless. Before I could formulate a response, she continued. When I saw the plans for this place, what you're creating here, she gestured toward the architectural renderings I'd shown her. It's not what I would have chosen, but I can see why it matters to Ethan, why it would have mattered to Dad. It would have, I confirmed softly. It was his vision as much as mine. Caroline turned from the window to face me directly. I still wish you'd told me earlier, included me in the planning process somehow, but I understand now why you didn't. The acknowledgement was as close to an apology as Caroline was likely to offer for her behavior at the wedding. I accepted it in the spirit intended, without pressing for more explicit contrition. Would you be interested in seeing the educational component plans? I asked, offering a bridge toward greater involvement. The foundation will include programs for medical students specializing in pediatric oncology. Your experience on the hospital auxiliary board might provide valuable insight. It was a small opening, a specific limited invitation rather than a general appeal for participation. Caroline's expertise in fundraising and event planning for the hospital was genuine, one of the few areas where her social connections and organizational skills served a purpose beyond self-promotion. I'd like that, she said, surprising me again with her ready acceptance. Richard keeps saying I need more meaningful projects now that the children are grown. We moved back inside, where Lisa was directing a team measuring for custom cabinetry in what would become the medical supply area. She glanced up with evident curiosity as Caroline and I entered. Lisa, this is my daughter Caroline, I introduced them. She has extensive experience with hospital auxiliary programs that might be relevant to our educational initiatives. Perhaps you could share those proposal documents when you have a moment. Of course, Lisa replied smoothly. Though I caught the flicker of recognition in her eyes, she had undoubtedly been briefed about the wedding incident by Foundation board members. We're actually discussing that component at next week's committee meeting. Would you be interested in attending, Mrs. Bradford? Please, call me Caroline, my daughter responded with the social grace that had always come naturally to her. And yes, I'd be interested, schedule permitting. As they exchanged contact information, I observed the interaction with cautious optimism. Caroline's involvement with the foundation wouldn't magically resolve all our differences or heal decades of misunderstanding, but it represented possibility, a potential path toward mutual respect that had seemed unimaginable in the aftermath of the wedding. Later, as we walked toward our respective cars in the circular driveway, Caroline paused, her expression thoughtful. For what it's worth, Mother, I am sorry about the wedding, not just for the public embarrassment, but for what it revealed about my own materialistic tendencies. We all have our blind spots, I said gently. Even at 72, I'm still discovering mine. Ethan sent me some photos from the Amalfi Coast yesterday, she continued, changing the subject to safer territory. They look ridiculously happy. As newlyweds should, I agreed, grateful for this small exchange of family information that indicated normal relationships might eventually resume. Caroline hesitated before adding, I told him about visiting the foundation site, about possibly getting involved with the educational program. He seemed pleased. The uncertainty in her voice revealed how much Ethan's approval mattered to her, despite the confident facade she typically presented to the world. In that moment, I glimpsed the vulnerable mother beneath the polished exterior, a woman who, like me, sometimes worried about her adequacy in that most challenging of roles. "He values your support," I said, offering the reassurance she seemed to need. "It means a great deal to him that you're considering participation in something so personal to his journey." Caroline nodded, visibly processing this perspective. "Well, I should get back to the city. Richard's expecting me for dinner with clients." "Of course. Thank you for coming by, Caroline. It was a pleasant surprise." As I watched her drive away, I felt a tentative hope take root. The breach created at the wedding hadn't been fully healed, but a foundation for repair had been established, much like the literal foundation taking shape within the house behind me. Both would require time, patience, and deliberate nurturing to reach their full potential. Both represented possibilities rather than certainties, but for today, possibility was enough. "Grandma, you have to see these photos from the Amalfi Coast," Ethan insisted, scrolling through his phone with the enthusiasm of a child showing off a new toy. The private yacht tour was incredible, though we still haven't figured out how Caroline afforded it. 3 weeks after returning from their honeymoon, Ethan and Rachel had come to Boston for the weekend, ostensibly to attend a medical conference, but primarily to reconnect with family after their extended absence. We sat in my small garden courtyard, enjoying unseasonably warm spring weather and the simple pleasure of being together again. "Your mother has her resources," I replied diplomatically, accepting the phone to admire images of crystal blue waters and picturesque coastal villages. I believe she wanted to make amends for the wedding incident. Ethan's expression sobered slightly. "She mentioned you two had lunch, and that she visited the foundation site." "Yes to both," I confirmed, returning his phone. "She's expressed interest in contributing to the educational components of the program." "That's unexpected," Rachel observed, her natural diplomacy not quite concealing her surprise. In a good way, of course. Rachel had integrated seamlessly into our family, her gentle perceptiveness and unfailing kindness making her an ideal partner for Ethan. Today she looked particularly radiant, her honeymoon tan complementing the simple sundress she wore. "Caroline is making an effort," I said carefully. "I think the wedding confrontation forced some uncomfortable self-reflection." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "She called us while we were in Rome, didn't exactly apologize directly, but admitted she'd been inappropriately focused on material considerations, which for Mom is practically sackcloth and ashes." His assessment made me smile despite the seriousness of the topic. Ethan had always possessed an uncanny ability to distill complex situations to their essence, a quality that undoubtedly served him well as a diagnostic physician. "How do you feel about her potential involvement with the foundation?" I asked, genuinely curious about his perspective. I didn't want to commit to anything substantial without consulting you first. Ethan exchanged a quick glance with Rachel before responding, the silent communication of couples already attuned to each other's thoughts. "I think it could be positive, actually. Mom has always been excellent at the social aspects of fundraising and event planning, and it might help her understand why the foundation matters so much to me." "To us," Rachel amended gently. "I've seen what families go through during pediatric cancer treatment. Having a place like the retreat to decompress and reconnect as a family unit will be transformative for so many people." Her quiet passion reminded me why Ethan had fallen in love with her. Beneath her reserved exterior lay a depth of empathy and commitment that matched his own. The contractor reports were still on schedule for the September opening, I informed them, reaching for my iced tea. "The medical equipment installation begins next month, and the staff hiring process is nearly complete. Just in time for the official announcement at the Children's Hospital Benefit Gala," Ethan noted. "Perfect timing for introducing the foundation to potential referring physicians." The conversation shifted to practical matters. Staffing structures, patient referral protocols, the integration of the retreat program with existing treatment centers. Ethan and Rachel, both medical professionals intimately familiar with pediatric care systems, offered insights that would prove invaluable as the foundation moved from concept to operational reality. As they spoke, I found myself studying them with a grandmother's loving attention to detail. The subtle signs of increased confidence in Ethan's posture, the way Rachel's hand occasionally rested protectively over her abdomen when certain topics arose. The exchanged glances that seemed to carry unspoken meaning. "There's something you're not telling me," I observed, during a natural pause in the conversation. Something beyond foundation updates and honeymoon adventures. They exchanged another of those telling glances before Ethan broke into a grin he could no longer suppress. We were going to wait until dinner with everyone tonight, but since you've already detected something. Rachel reached for his hand, her smile matching his in brightness, if not in scale. We're pregnant, she confirmed softly. Just about 8 weeks along, due in late November. Joy bloomed within me, immediate and uncomplicated. Oh, this is wonderful news. We found out just before leaving Italy, Ethan explained, his expression a mixture of excitement and lingering disbelief. The doctor confirmed it when we got back. Everything looks perfect so far. A honeymoon baby, I said, reaching to embrace them both. Your grandfather would have been absolutely delighted. We thought the same thing, Rachel agreed, returning my hug. Especially with the timing, the baby will arrive right around his birthday. The coincidence, if it was indeed mere coincidence, felt like Walter's hand reaching across the divide that separated us, a cosmic wink acknowledging his continued presence in our family story. Have you told your parents yet, Rachel? And Caroline and David? I asked, already anticipating the various reactions this news would generate throughout our extended family. My parents know. We told them yesterday. We're planning to tell everyone else at dinner tonight, she explained, though we'd appreciate if you'd act surprised for the official announcement. I promise to deliver an Oscar-worthy performance of grandmotherly shock, I assured them with a smile. Though containing my excitement until this evening may prove challenging. Ethan laughed, the carefree sound that had been his father's favorite. We're counting on your legendary self-control, Grandma. Caroline would never forgive us if she thought you heard the news first. The mention of Caroline brought a slight shadow to our joyful moment, a reminder of family complications that remained despite recent progress toward reconciliation. How is she doing, really? I asked, seizing the opportunity to gain Ethan's unfiltered perspective. Our interactions have been civil, but somewhat tentative. Ethan considered the question thoughtfully. Better, I think. More reflective than I've ever seen her. The wedding incident seemed to trigger something, maybe embarrassment, maybe genuine regret. Either way, she's making an effort to be less Caroline-like. His diplomatic phrasing made Rachel smile, despite her usual reluctance to criticize her mother-in-law. She's called me 3 times since we got back, just to check in. No agenda, no subtle digs about my career or our living situation, just actual conversation. This development surprised me almost as much as the pregnancy announcement. Caroline had never made much effort with her children's partners, viewing them as either strategic assets or unfortunate necessities depending on her assessment of their social and financial value. That's encouraging, I said cautiously, though major personality transformations rarely happen overnight. Oh, she's still Caroline, Ethan confirmed with a knowing smile. Last week she sent us a list of appropriate preschools to consider for a child who won't be born for another 7 months. But there's a new self-awareness beneath the usual behavior, like she's catching herself in the middle of old patterns. The assessment aligned with my own observations during our recent interactions. Caroline still exhibited her lifelong materialistic tendencies and social climbing instincts, but now with occasional moments of self-correction that suggested emerging insight. Speaking of tonight's dinner, Rachel said, checking her watch, we should probably head back to the hotel to freshen up. Caroline mentioned dressing appropriately for the venue 3 separate times when she confirmed the reservation. Some things never change, Ethan observed, with a mixture of exasperation and affection. At least she's consistent. As I walked them to their car, a profound sense of contentment settled over me. Despite the wedding drama and ongoing family tensions, the future seemed suddenly brighter. A great-grandchild on the way, the foundation nearing completion, tentative healing beginning to take root even with Caroline. Walter had always insisted that family was life's greatest investment, with dividends that continued to accumulate long after other assets had been distributed or depleted. Today's news proved his wisdom once again. We'll see you at 7, Ethan confirmed, leaning down to kiss my cheek before opening Rachel's car door. Try to contain your excitement until after the appetizers at least. I'll do my best, I promised, waving as they drove away. Back in my garden, I sat quietly for several minutes, allowing the joy of their news to wash through me completely. A great-grandchild, new life emerging just as the foundation, Walter's final vision, was taking physical form. The timing felt providential rather than coincidental, a reminder that endings and beginnings were often different perspectives on the same moment in time. Fontana's, one of Boston's most exclusive restaurants, gleamed with understated elegance. Crisp white tablecloths, softly glowing sconces, discreet waitstaff moving with practiced efficiency between tables. Caroline had chosen the venue, naturally. Her selections always communicated status rather than comfort, impression rather than intimacy. I arrived precisely on time to find David and Jennifer already seated at the large round table in a semi-private alcove. Caroline and Richard joined us moments later, followed by Rachel's parents, Robert and Susan Mitchell, whom I'd grown increasingly fond of since the wedding. "Margaret, you look lovely," Susan greeted me warmly, her genuine affection a welcome contrast to Caroline's air kisses and social performance. The Mitchells represented a different approach to wealth than either branch of the Hawthorne family. Their fortune, derived from Robert's successful medical device company, was substantial but worn lightly. They drove sensible luxury cars rather than flashy sports models, lived in the same comfortable home they'd purchased 20 years earlier, and funded scholarships at the state university rather than emblazoning their name across hospital wings. In many ways, they reminded me of Walter and myself, people who viewed financial success as responsibility rather than entitlement. Perhaps this explained why Rachel had adapted so seamlessly to our family values, despite Caroline's occasionally overwhelming presence. "Ethan just texted they're parking now," David informed us, glancing at his phone. "Should be up momentarily." Caroline signaled imperiously for the sommelier, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light as she gestured. "We should select the wine before they arrive. I've asked the chef to prepare a special tasting menu to welcome them home properly." The statement revealed Caroline's current position on the spectrum between old and new behaviors. The impulse to control the experience through high-end consumption remained, but the motivation now included genuine desire to celebrate her son rather than merely impress observers. Progress, I noted silently. Incremental, but real. When Ethan and Rachel finally appeared, they were immediately enveloped in enthusiastic greetings. Hugs from the Mitchells, warm handshakes from David and Richard, air kisses from Caroline. I hung back slightly, maintaining the facade that I hadn't already seen them earlier in the day. "You both look wonderfully rested," Caroline observed, scrutinizing them with maternal attention to detail. "Italy clearly agreed with you." "It was magical," Rachel confirmed, accepting the seat Richard held for her. "Though, we're happy to be home again, too." The early conversation flowed predictably. Honeymoon highlights, work transitions as they both returned to their medical careers, polite inquiries about everyone else's activities during their absence. Caroline dominated as usual, though I noticed subtle differences in her interaction style. Occasional pauses to allow others to speak, genuine questions about Rachel's experiences rather than performative interest. As appetizers arrived, beautifully plated scallops arranged like modernist sculptures, Ethan caught my eye across the table with a barely perceptible nod. The signal we'd agreed upon earlier, the announcement would come soon. "Before we get too far into dinner," he said, reaching for Rachel's hand, "we have some news we'd like to share with everyone." The table fell silent, attention focusing instantly on the young couple. Rachel's mother Susan straightened slightly, a flicker of anticipation crossing her features that suggested maternal intuition might have already provided a hint of what was coming. "Rachel and I," Ethan continued, his voice steady despite the emotion visible in his eyes, "are expecting a baby in late November." The announcement landed like a stone in still water, ripples of reaction spreading outward around the table. Susan's hands flew to her mouth, her suspicions confirmed. Robert beamed with grandfatherly pride. David and Jennifer exchanged delighted glances. Caroline, I noticed, had gone perfectly still, her expression frozen in a state of processing I recognized from childhood, the look she'd worn when absorbing information that required recalibration of her expectations or plans. "A baby," she repeated finally, her voice uncharacteristically soft. "I'm going to be a grandmother." The simplicity of her response, stripped of her usual social performance, revealed how genuinely the news had affected her. For perhaps the first time in decades, Caroline had been rendered momentarily authentic by surprise. "We had the 8-week checkup yesterday," Rachel explained, glowing with contained joy. "Everything looks perfect so far." "Due in November?" Susan asked, clearly calculating the timeline. "So you conceived?" "In Italy," Ethan confirmed with a smile. "Somewhere between Rome and the Amalfi Coast. A honeymoon baby," Richard observed, raising his wineglass. "That calls for a toast." As glasses were raised around the table, I watched Caroline carefully, curious how she would navigate this unexpected transition to grandmother status. At 51, she was relatively young for the role, but had always defined herself primarily through status markers that didn't include grandmotherhood. "To the newest Hawthorne," Richard offered, ever the diplomat, "and to the wonderful parents-to-be." "The newest Hawthorne," Caroline echoed, her composure returning as she lifted her glass. Then, in a moment of surprising vulnerability, she added, "I only wish Dad were here for this." The simple acknowledgement of Walter's absence, something Caroline rarely referenced directly, created a moment of shared emotion around the table. Even Robert and Susan Mitchell, who had never met my late husband, seemed moved by the recognition of his place in our family constellation. "He would have been overjoyed," I said softly, "especially with the timing. The baby is due very near his birthday." Ethan nodded, his expression reflective. "We thought the same thing when we calculated the due date. It felt like more than coincidence somehow." "I'm going to need to completely rethink the guest bedroom," Caroline announced suddenly, her practical planning instinct asserting itself through emotion. "It needs to be converted to a proper nursery before November." Rachel exchanged an amused glance with Ethan before responding diplomatically. "That's very thoughtful, Caroline, though we probably won't be traveling with the baby immediately." "Nonsense!" Caroline dismissed this practical consideration with a wave of her hand. "Holidays are for family gatherings. The baby will need a proper space in our home from the beginning." The familiar controlling tendency might have been irritating in another context, but tonight it carried a different quality. The channeling of genuine excitement into tangible preparation, Caroline's particular way of expressing care through environmental management. As main courses arrived and conversation continued to flow around baby-related topics, I observed the subtle shifts in family dynamics occurring before my eyes. Caroline and Susan Mitchell, previously cordial but distant, were suddenly united in shared grandmother status, comparing notes on baby gear and nursery essentials. David was offering paternity leave advice to Ethan based on his own experience. Richard and Robert had discovered a mutual interest in establishing education funds for the coming grandchild. The pregnancy had created new connective tissue between previously separate family units, bridges forming across divides that had seemed unbridgeable just months earlier. "You're quiet tonight, Margaret," Richard observed during a natural pause in conversation. "Everything all right?" "Just enjoying the moment," I replied truthfully. "Watching my family grow in more ways than one." His perceptive gaze suggested understanding beyond my simple explanation. Richard had always been the most emotionally intelligent member of Caroline's immediate family, often serving as translator between his wife's material expressions of love and others' different emotional languages. "It's been quite a year already," he acknowledged. "The wedding, the foundation progress, and now a baby on the way. Life continues to unfold in unexpected directions." The observation perfectly captured what I'd been feeling but hadn't articulated, the sense of life's persistent forward motion, bringing new possibilities even amid complicated relationships and unresolved tensions. As dessert was served, an elaborate chocolate creation Carolyn had apparently prearranged with the chef, Ethan rose with his water glass in hand. "One more announcement," he said, drawing the table's attention once again. "Rachel and I have been talking about how we want to honor this new chapter in our family's story." Rachel nodded encouragingly as he continued. "We've decided to establish a permanent endowment within the Walter Hawthorne Foundation, a special fund specifically dedicated to supporting siblings of cancer patients during treatment. Children who are often overlooked in the crisis, but deeply affected nonetheless. The thoughtfulness of their decision touched me deeply." Ethan had often spoken about how his own illness had impacted his younger cousins, who had struggled with reduced attention and disrupted routines during his treatment. "The Walter Hawthorne Family Support Fund," Ethan continued, his voice steady with conviction, "ensuring that entire families receive the care they need during the most challenging times." Caroline, to my surprise, was the first to respond. "That's a beautiful idea, Ethan. Truly meaningful." Her voice carried genuine appreciation rather than the social performance I might have expected. "Your father would have been proud." The simple statement, offered without dramatic flourish or performative emotion, suggested a depth of understanding I hadn't credited Caroline with possessing. Perhaps her involvement with the foundation planning was indeed creating shifts in perspective that went beyond surface accommodation. As the evening wound toward conclusion, I found myself filled with quiet optimism about our family's future, still complex and occasionally challenging, but moving gradually toward greater understanding and connection. The baby would arrive in November, the foundation would open in September, and somewhere in between, perhaps the remaining fractures in our family relationships would continue their tentative healing. Not perfect, certainly, but genuinely hopeful in a way that would have made Walter smile with satisfaction. September arrived with picture-perfect weather, as if nature itself approved of the Walter Hawthorne Foundation's official opening. The Palm Beach property had undergone its remarkable transformation. Medical accommodations seamlessly integrated into the home's elegant architecture, accessible features incorporated without institutional appearance, healing gardens created where formal landscaping had once dominated. I stood on the terrace, Walter's favorite spot, watching as staff made final preparations for the ribbon-cutting ceremony scheduled for noon. Medical equipment had been discreetly positioned throughout the facility. The professional kitchen gleamed with new appliances designed for both nutritional preparation and cooking therapy sessions. The former pool house had been converted into a meditation space overlooking the ocean. "It's magnificent, Margaret," said Dr. Eleanor Winters, the renowned pediatric oncologist who had agreed to serve as the foundation's medical director. "Better than I imagined when I reviewed the initial plans." "Thank you," I replied, genuinely touched by her approval. "The architects and designers exceeded our expectations." "Because you gave them both clear vision and creative freedom," she observed. "Not an easy balance to achieve." The guest list for today's opening was deliberately limited. Medical professionals who would be referring patients, foundation board members, key donors, and immediate family. A more public open house would follow next week, but today's event was designed to allow healthcare partners to fully understand the facility's capabilities without overwhelming crowds. Caroline had surprised everyone by volunteering to handle the event planning, a task she excelled at but rarely applied to causes beyond her usual social circuit. For the past 2 months, she had thrown herself into the details with characteristic intensity, coordinating with caterers, arranging transportation for out-of-town medical partners, creating information packets that were both comprehensive and elegant. "Mother, there you are," she called, appearing at the terrace doorway with clipboard in hand. "The photographer needs to know if you want formal portraits of the board before or after the ribbon cutting." "After would be better," I decided. "Some board members are still arriving." Caroline nodded, making a note. "And Ethan just texted. Their flight landed on time. They should be here within 30 minutes. Ethan and Rachel, now 5 months into pregnancy with a visible baby bump that Ethan proudly documented in weekly photos, had flown in from Boston specifically for the opening. Despite their busy medical schedules, they had been intimately involved in the foundation's development through video conferences and weekend planning sessions. "Perfect timing," I said, glancing at my watch. "Everything seems to be coming together beautifully, Caroline. You've done an extraordinary job with the arrangements." She accepted the compliment with uncharacteristic modesty. "The foundation deserves a proper launch. I wanted to make sure it reflected the significance of what you and Dad envisioned." The simple acknowledgement of Walter's role, delivered without resentment or qualification, marked how far we had come since the wedding confrontation. Caroline would likely never fully embrace our philosophy regarding wealth and material possessions, but she had developed genuine respect for the foundation's purpose. "Your father would be pleased," I said softly. "Not just with the foundation itself, but with your contribution to its success." Something flickered across Caroline's features, a complex emotion I couldn't quite identify. Before she could respond, David appeared with several board members in tow, drawing us back into the practical matters at hand. The ceremony unfolded with dignified simplicity, after brief welcoming remarks from Dr. Winters about the medical significance of the retreat concept. I stepped to the podium positioned at the edge of the terrace, the magnificent Atlantic Ocean providing a perfect backdrop. The Walter Hawthorne Foundation welcomes you to this new chapter in pediatric cancer support, I began, my voice steady, despite the emotion tightening my throat. What you see around you represents not just a building transformed, but a vision fulfilled. From my position, I could see the entire gathering, medical professionals in formal attire, foundation staff in matching navy blazers, family members seated in the front row. Ethan and Rachel had arrived just in time, slipping into chairs beside Caroline and Richard. David and Jennifer sat with their teenage daughter, who was documenting everything with her phone camera for a school project on philanthropy. When my late husband Walter first suggested converting our family home into a healing retreat, he spoke of creating a place where medical necessity could coexist with family normalcy, I continued, where children fighting cancer could temporarily escape the clinical environment of hospitals without sacrificing needed care, where families stressed by treatment protocols could reconnect in peaceful surroundings. A murmur of appreciation rippled through the audience. Several oncologists nodded in understanding, their professional experience confirming the need for exactly this type of facility. Today, that vision becomes operational reality. Beginning next week, the foundation will welcome its first families, 3 children at various stages of treatment, along with their parents and siblings. Here they will find not just medical support, but opportunities for family healing that transcend the physical aspects of cancer care. I paused, gathering myself for the most personal part of my remarks. This mission holds particular significance for our family because of our grandson Ethan's journey through childhood leukemia. This very house served as his sanctuary between treatments, a place where he could feel normal even when his body was fighting an abnormal battle. Ethan's eyes met mine across the gathering, his expression a mixture of pride and remembered pain. Rachel's hand rested protectively on her growing belly, a gesture that linked past struggles with future hopes. Walter didn't live to see this day, but his vision infuses every aspect of what we've created here. The Walter Hawthorne Foundation represents his belief that meaningful legacy isn't measured in assets retained, but in lives transformed. From the corner of my eye, I saw Caroline's posture shift slightly at these words. Not tension, but recognition, perhaps even acceptance of a perspective she had once rejected entirely. I invite you now to join us in officially opening this facility, I concluded, moving toward the ceremonial ribbon stretched across the main entrance. Not as a replacement for critical hospital care, but as an essential complement to the healing journey. Dr. Winters joined me at the ribbon, along with Ethan representing both the board and his personal experience as a childhood cancer survivor. The oversized scissors made a satisfying snick as we cut the blue silk ribbon together, official photographers capturing the moment from multiple angles. Applause erupted from the gathered crowd as staff opened the doors wide, inviting guests to tour the transformed space that would soon welcome its first patient families. As I stepped back from the formal portion of the ceremony, Caroline appeared at my side, her expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. "I understand now," she said quietly, her voice meant only for me. "What you and Dad were trying to create. It's not about giving away family assets, it's about extending family purpose." The insight, delivered without drama or performance, affected me more deeply than any elaborate apology could have. Caroline had finally grasped the fundamental principle that had guided Walter's and my decisions about wealth and legacy. "That's exactly right," I confirmed, momentarily too moved for further elaboration. She nodded, a certain peace settling over her features. "I still wish I'd known earlier, been part of the planning from the beginning, but I can see now why this matters to Ethan, to all of us really." Before I could respond, we were surrounded by well-wishers and medical partners, eager to discuss the facility's capabilities. The moment of connection with Caroline transitioned seamlessly into the professional responsibilities of the day, but its significance remained with me as we moved through the remainder of the opening events. Later, as guests enjoyed a catered lunch on the terrace, I found myself momentarily alone, watching the gathering from a quiet corner. The foundation staff looked sharp and purposeful in their new uniforms. Medical partners engaged in animated discussions about patient referral protocols. Family members mingled comfortably with board members and donors. "Penny for your thoughts," came Ethan's voice as he approached, 2 glasses of sparkling water in hand. "You looked miles away just now." Just absorbing the moment, I replied, accepting the offered drink. Seeing all the pieces finally come together. Ethan nodded, his gaze sweeping over the gathering. Grandpa would have loved this, seeing his concept become reality, watching how it's already bringing people together around a shared purpose. He would have, I agreed. Though I think he'd be equally pleased by the family healing that's happened alongside the foundation development. Mom's transformation has been something to witness, Ethan observed, watching Caroline across the terrace as she graciously introduced 2 pediatric specialists to a major donor. I never expected her to engage so genuinely with the foundation concept. People can surprise us, I said, especially when given the opportunity to connect with something larger than themselves. Ethan's hand came to rest briefly on my shoulder, a gesture of affection and respect that reminded me powerfully of Walter. You never gave up on that possibility, even when it seemed unlikely. That patience is as much your legacy as this building. The observation touched me deeply, particularly coming from this grandson who had faced mortality far earlier than any child should. His perspective carried the weight of someone who understood the true value of time and relationship. As the opening day transitioned into evening and guests gradually departed, I found myself back on Walter's favorite terrace, watching the same ocean sunset he had loved for decades. The house no longer belonged to us in a technical sense. It was now foundation property, dedicated to a purpose beyond private family use. Yet somehow, in transforming its function, we had preserved its essence more authentically than any other approach could have achieved. The Walter Hawthorne Foundation would carry forward the values that had always infused this space: healing, connection, the restoration that comes from beauty and peace intentionally shared. Not everyone would have understood or approved of our choice, but standing there as twilight settled over the property's new incarnation, I felt Walter's presence and approval as tangibly as the ocean breeze against my skin. "We did it," I whispered to his memory. "It's everything you imagined." And somewhere in the gathering darkness, I could almost hear his response. "No, Maggie, it's more." November arrived with the crisp clarity that only New England autumn's truly perfect. Golden light slanting through partially bare trees, mornings edged with frost, afternoons warmed by lingering summer memories. In my Boston townhouse, I moved through familiar routines with heightened awareness, my phone never far from reach. Rachel had entered her 39th week of pregnancy. The baby, a boy they'd discovered during the 20-week ultrasound, could arrive any day now. "No signs of imminent labor," Ethan reported during our morning check-in call, though Rachel says she'll evict him personally if he doesn't make an appearance by the weekend. I smiled at the image of my normally gentle granddaughter-in-law issuing eviction notices to her unborn child. "First babies often take their time. Your father was 2 weeks late, much to your grandmother's dismay." "That's exactly what Mom keeps telling Rachel," Ethan said with a laugh. One of the few instances where Caroline's advice has actually been reassuring rather than stress-inducing. Caroline had embraced her impending grandmother status with surprising enthusiasm, channeling her organizational talents into practical preparation rather than social performance. She'd hosted a tasteful baby shower, researched the safest infant equipment with scientific thoroughness, and even attended childbirth education classes with Rachel when Ethan was called away for a medical conference. "How is your mother doing with the waiting game?" I asked, genuinely curious about Caroline's emotional state as the birth approached. "Surprisingly calm," Ethan replied. "She's completed the nursery at her house, stocked our freezer with prepared meals, and arranged her schedule to be available at a moment's notice. But she's not hovering or trying to control the process, which is," he paused, searching for the right word, "unprecedented." The observation aligned with what I'd noticed myself during recent interactions with Caroline. Since the foundation opening 2 months earlier, she had exhibited a more grounded quality, still perfectionistic and status-conscious in many ways, but with a new layer of perspective that tempered her more materialistic tendencies. After our morning call ended, I turned my attention to the foundation update that had arrived by email. The Walter Hawthorne Foundation had welcomed its 4th group of families, 11 children with cancer, and their immediate family members, including siblings who particularly benefited from the specialized support programs. Initial outcomes were exceeding expectations. Medical partners reported improved treatment adherence when families knew a retreat stay awaited them after difficult procedures. Parents described reduced family tension and better communication. Most importantly, the children themselves showed measurable quality of life improvements, better sleep patterns, reduced anxiety, and increased willingness to engage with necessary medical protocols. Walter's vision, brought to physical reality through our combined efforts, was already creating ripples of positive impact beyond what we had initially projected. As I finished reviewing the report, my phone rang with Caroline's distinctive tone, a rare occurrence for mid-morning on a weekday when she was typically immersed in committee meetings or charity planning sessions. "Good morning, Caroline," I answered, a flutter of anticipation rising. "Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine," she assured me quickly. "No baby news yet. I'm actually calling about the foundation." "Oh?" I settled back in my chair, curious about this unexpected topic. "I've been thinking about the family support programs," she continued, her tone businesslike yet tinged with unusual hesitancy. "Specifically, the sibling support components." "What about them?" I prompted when she paused. "They're good," Caroline said carefully, "but I think they could be expanded in meaningful ways, particularly for adolescent siblings who have unique challenges during a family cancer journey." Her interest surprised me. Caroline had been professionally involved with the Foundation's educational outreach and event planning, but hadn't previously expressed specific programmatic ideas. "I'm listening," I encouraged, genuinely curious where this was heading. "I've drafted a proposal," she replied, her confidence returning. "A specialized retreat weekend specifically for teenage siblings, combining therapeutic support with normal adolescent social experiences they often miss during a family health crisis." As she outlined the concept in greater detail, I found myself impressed by both the thoughtfulness of the programming and Caroline's evident passion for the idea. She had clearly conducted substantial research, consulting with adolescent psychology experts and reviewing similar programs at other facilities. "This is excellent work, Caroline," I said when she finished her explanation. "What inspired such a specific focus?" A moment of silence preceded her response. "I've been talking with some of the families who've completed retreat stays. One mother mentioned how her teenage son was falling behind in school, withdrawing from friends, essentially putting his entire development on hold while his younger sister fought leukemia." Another pause, longer this time. "It reminded me of Ethan's illness," she continued, her voice softer. "How completely our family life revolved around his treatment. How everything else, including David's college applications and my dance recitals, became secondary concerns that no one had capacity to properly address." The personal connection surprised me. Caroline rarely referenced that difficult period in our family history, and had never before acknowledged any lasting impact on her own experience. "I didn't realize you felt that way," I said carefully. "Neither did I, really," she admitted, not consciously. "But working with these families, seeing the siblings' struggles reflected back at me, it clarified some things about my own reactions during that time." The self-awareness in her response, the ability to recognize patterns in her own behavior through observing others, represented genuine emotional growth that both surprised and moved me. "I think your program concept has tremendous merit," I told her. "Would you be interested in presenting it at the next board meeting?" "I would," she replied, obvious pleasure in her voice. "I've already discussed preliminary budget implications with the development team. The program could be implemented by spring, if approved." We spoke for several more minutes about logistical details before Caroline needed to end the call for another commitment. As I hung up, I found myself reflecting on the unexpected gifts that continued to emerge from Walter's Foundation vision, not just the healing impact on patient families, but the ripple effects within our own family dynamics. Caroline had found meaningful purpose through engagement with the Foundation's mission. Her natural talents for organization and social networking, previously directed primarily towards status enhancement, were now being channeled into program development that could genuinely improve lives. My phone rang again just as I was preparing lunch, Ethan's ringtone this time, triggering an immediate surge of anticipation. "Mom's water broke an hour ago," he announced without preamble, excitement and nervous energy evident in his rapid speech. "We're at the hospital now. Early labor stage. Could be several hours yet, but everything's progressing normally." "Wonderful news," I replied, my own heart rate accelerating despite my outward calm. How is Rachel feeling? Focused, determined, occasionally threatening my future reproductive capacity when contractions peak. His laugh held equal parts humor and awe. She's amazing, Grandma. Absolute warrior mode. Women generally are during childbirth, I observed, remembering my own experiences decades earlier. Have you notified everyone else? Mom and Dad are already here. Rachel's parents are driving in from Connecticut, should arrive within 2 hours. David and Jennifer know, but are waiting for further updates before coming to the hospital. We spoke briefly about practical matters, the hospital's visitation policies, the labor and delivery unit's reputation, the experienced doula they'd engaged to provide additional support. Throughout the conversation, Ethan maintained remarkable composure for a first-time father, his medical training providing helpful context for the process unfolding. I should get back to Rachel, he said finally. We'll keep you updated. With any luck, Walter Jonathan Hawthorne will make his appearance before midnight. The name they'd chosen, announced at a family dinner the previous month, had brought tears to my eyes when first revealed. Walter for his great-grandfather's legacy, Jonathan for Rachel's beloved grandfather who had passed away during their engagement. Give Rachel my love, I said. I'll be ready to come whenever you want me there. After ending the call, I moved through my home with purposeful efficiency, packing an overnight bag in case the birth process extended through the night. Though the hospital was less than 30 minutes from my townhouse, I wanted to be prepared for any scenario. As twilight descended over Boston, transforming the city into a landscape of glowing windows and golden streetlights, my phone chimed with text messages from both Caroline and David, providing parallel updates from the hospital. Labor was progressing steadily. Rachel was navigating contractions with remarkable focus. Medical staff were pleased with all vital signs for both mother and baby. At 9:47 p.m., the message I'd been waiting for arrived. A photo of Rachel cradling a swaddled newborn, Ethan beside them with an expression of wonder I'd never before seen on my grandson's face. The accompanying text from Caroline was uncharacteristically simple. Walter Jonathan Hawthorne, 8 lbs, 2 Oz, 21 inches. Perfect in every way. Born at 9:32 p.m. on his great-grandfather's birthday, the timing registered like an electrical current through my body. November 17th, Walter's birthday. The coincidence, if indeed it was mere coincidence, felt like a cosmic acknowledgement, a thread connecting generations across the divide of mortality. You planned this somehow, didn't you? I whispered to Walter's memory, tears blurring my vision as I studied the image of our first great-grandchild. Always did have a flair for the dramatic gesture. By the time I arrived at the hospital the following morning, baby Walter had already been examined by pediatricians, admired by both sets of grandparents, and photographed extensively by various family members. I found Rachel sitting up in bed, looking tired but radiant, the newborn sleeping peacefully in her arms. Grandma Margaret, she greeted me with a warm smile. Come meet your namesake. My namesake, I asked, confused as I approached the bed. I thought his name was Walter Jonathan. Walter Jonathan Margaret Hawthorne, Ethan clarified, appearing from the adjoining bathroom. We added your name as his third. It seemed right to honor both of you. The unexpected inclusion of my name alongside Walter's brought fresh emotion to a heart already overflowing. As Rachel carefully transferred the sleeping infant to my arms, I studied his tiny features with wonder. The delicate eyelashes, the perfectly formed fingernails, the rosebud mouth that occasionally twitched in sleep. He has the Hawthorne chin, observed Caroline, who sat in a corner armchair looking unusually relaxed, despite having been at the hospital all night. And Rachel's nose, I think. Definitely Rachel's nose, agreed Susan Mitchell from nearby, where she and Robert had been quietly supportive throughout the birth process and aftermath. As I held this new life, this continuation of our family story, I was struck by the gathering of people in the hospital room. Caroline and Richard, Susan and Robert Mitchell, David and Jennifer, who had arrived early that morning, all united by connection to this small being who represented future possibilities beyond anything we could imagine. I wish your grandfather could see you, I whispered to the sleeping infant. He would be so proud of the family surrounding you today. He sees, Caroline said unexpectedly, her voice soft but certain. I believe that completely. Coming from my typically pragmatic, non-sentimental daughter, the statement carried particular weight. I looked up to find her watching me with an expression of unusual vulnerability. Last night, waiting for the baby, she continued, I found myself talking to Dad in my head, telling him about the Foundation's progress, about the new program I'm developing, about this little one about to join us, and I could feel him listening somehow. She shrugged slightly, embarrassed by her own disclosure. That probably sounds ridiculous. Not ridiculous at all, I assured her, our eyes meeting in rare perfect understanding. I talked to him regularly. As morning progressed into afternoon, I observed the easy interaction between Caroline and Susan Mitchell as they coordinated food deliveries and visitor scheduling, the comfortable conversation between Richard and Robert about newborn care and grandfatherly duties, the natural teamwork of our blended family units creating support around Ethan, Rachel, and baby Walter. The journey that had begun with such discord at the wedding had transformed into something I wouldn't have dared hope for 9 months earlier. Not perfect harmony, but genuine connection founded on shared values and mutual respect. Standing at the hospital room window with sleeping baby Walter against my shoulder, I watched November sunlight illuminate the Boston skyline. 3 generations of hawthorns surrounded me in that room, with a 4th now nestled in my arms. The foundation Walter had envisioned was already serving families in need. Caroline had found meaningful purpose beyond material acquisition. Ethan and Rachel were embarking on their parenting journey with solid support from both family branches. Not the legacy of houses or possessions or financial assets that Caroline had once prioritized, but something far more valuable, a legacy of purpose, connection, and values that would continue shaping lives long after material resources had been distributed or depleted. We did well, Walter, I whispered to both my late husband's memory and the tiny namesake sleeping against my heart. We did well indeed. As baby Walter joins the family on his great-grandfather's birthday, the Hawthorne legacy comes full circle. Margaret's quiet strength has guided her family through conflict to meaningful reconciliation, while the foundation continues to extend Walter's vision beyond family boundaries. Thank you for joining this journey of transformation, where an elderly widow's principled stand at her grandson's wedding ultimately led to deeper understanding, healing, and purpose across generations. If this story of family values, reconciliation, and meaningful legacy touched your heart, please subscribe and leave your likes, turn on notifications, and share your thoughts in the comments below.
Thật lòng mà nói, cảm giác đó là hoàn toàn hợp lý. Bởi vì những câu chuyện này không chỉ là giải trí, chúng gắn với lịch sử thật, những khó khăn thật, những cảm xúc thật, nên mình luôn cố gắng không bao giờ tiếp cận chúng một cách hời hợt. Mọi thứ trên kênh này, dù là hư cấu, đều được xây dựng từ sự cẩn trọng, từ việc học hỏi, từ việc lắng nghe, từ việc cố gắng thấu hiểu. Dù mình biết rằng mình sẽ không bao giờ hiểu hết được tất cả mọi thứ, và điều đó rất là quan trọng với mình, bởi vì mình không ở đây để nói thay ai cả. Mình cũng không ở đây để thay thế cho tiếng nói của bất kỳ ai. Mình ở đây như một người kể chuyện, một người tin rằng nếu câu chuyện được kể bằng sự tôn trọng và chân thành thì nó có thể tạo ra sự kết nối thay vì chia rẽ. Và điều đó thực sự có ý nghĩa với mình. Mình cũng muốn bạn biết rằng mình luôn học hỏi. Mỗi bình luận, mỗi góc nhìn, mỗi phản hồi mình đều đọc, đều suy nghĩ và cố gắng cải thiện. Vì vậy nếu có điều gì mình làm chưa tốt, mình luôn sẵn sàng lắng nghe. Không phải để tranh luận, không phải để bảo vệ cái tôi, mà là để hiểu hơn và làm tốt hơn. Bởi vì cuối cùng, kênh này không phải là chỉ về mình. Nó là về những gì chúng ta có thể cùng cảm nhận được. Là về một không gian nơi tình yêu không bị giới hạn bởi màu da, bởi định kiến hay bởi những khuôn mẫu mà xã hội đặt ra. Là về việc cho thấy rằng sự kết nối, một sự kết nối thực sự có thể tồn tại ngay cả trong những hoàn cảnh mà người ta nghĩ là không thể. Và có lẽ thế giới này cần nhiều điều đó hơn nữa, nhiều sự thấu hiểu hơn, nhiều sự đồng cảm hơn, nhiều sự cởi mở hơn để nhìn nhau như những con người trước khi nhìn vào sự khác biệt. Vì vậy, khi bạn xem xong video này, mình không chỉ muốn bạn nhớ câu chuyện, mình muốn bạn nhớ cảm giác mà nó mang lại, những khoảnh khắc khiến bạn dừng lại, những khoảnh khắc khiến bạn suy nghĩ, bởi vì chính những điều đó mới thực sự có ý nghĩa. Nó nhắc chúng ta rằng dù chúng ta khác nhau về xuất phát điểm, về văn hóa, về trải nghiệm, chúng ta vẫn có thể kết nối với nhau theo những cách vượt qua tất cả những điều đó. Và đó là một điều rất mạnh mẽ. Nếu câu chuyện này đã chạm đến bạn, dù chỉ một chút thôi, thì cảm ơn các bạn rất nhiều vì đã ở lại đây với mình. Cảm ơn các bạn vì đã lắng nghe, đã cảm nhận và đã là một phần của không gian này. Và mình hy vọng các bạn sẽ tiếp tục đồng hành cùng mình trong những câu chuyện tiếp theo. Những câu chuyện về tình yêu, về sự can đảm và về sức mạnh của việc dám kết nối trong một thế giới đầy rào cản. Hẹn gặp lại các bạn ở những câu chuyện tiếp theo. Hãy giữ cho trái tim mình luôn rộng mở và đừng bao giờ đánh giá thấp sức mạnh của một tình yêu dám vượt qua mọi giới hạn. Bye!